This is Sam Vidget to Super Mars Base. Hey, I found the rock sample we wanted, and the Martian winds are really picking up now. I'd really like to come home.
Sam Vidget, this is Mars Base. There's been a bit of a development, and I don't think you can come home. Can you maybe, go somewhere else?
Where am I supposed to go? There is nowhere to go here.
I don't know, set up a new house somewhere, the canyons, maybe a cave, or find the local Butlins.
No, I'd really like to come home.
Look, I'll level with you. One of the facilities is broken, and it's just one of those things that I don't think we can repair.
But it always breaks. Don't worry about it.
No, I think this one is permanent damage. Mars is exciting, or was exciting a couple of years ago because NASA was making all the announcements and the Musk man was launching rockets into space, and then there was Matt Damon and his potatoes. We were excited by the possibilities of a new frontier, of exploring the unknown, of planting a flag into soil that was never touched before, just like my potatoes. It was en vogue.
Obviously, a slew of Mars-themed board games were announced. Some were successful and others have been forgotten about already. But one of them really stood out and captured the imagination. Not only do you get to experience cooperatively being the first scientists on Mars, but it's also a reboot of Robinson Crusoe, a game that has as many fans as it has problems. Whatever First Martians was going to be, can it really live up to all the expectations?
Hello and welcome. This is your new home. It's state of the art and has everything you need. It's got like a bandage room. There's a lot of places where you can work. There's a car house and there's a toilet. The rest is just there to keep you alive because sending you here was very expensive, and financially, people back at Earth rather you didn't die. But First Martians is not a game where you can just sit quietly in your office and do work whilst the wistful Martian breeze whistles past your window. Breaks. Like all of the time.
And that is essentially the crux of this game. Each time you play, you'll choose either a single mission of First Martian World problems or a campaign of avalanching disasters segmented into 5 games and tied together with a cohesive and progressive narrative. Each mission will have objectives that normally come in the form of special actions, and most of your focus will be on them. But of course, stuff breaks all around you all the time, and complications seem to come out of every cranny and crevice just to make your life that little bit more miserable. And if you ignore them, you will very likely die, and if you spend too much time on them, then you'll very likely fail the mission. It's a bit like a high wire balancing act, except that if you don't manage to do it right, you'll die. Wait a minute, no. You know what I mean.
You perform this high wire act with pawns and you place them wherever action needs happening. So say you want to increase everyone's morale, you send your little man to the crew quarters and done. Morale is already better. But some actions need more action put into them. Let's say that the processor unit in your oxygenator has broken because of a malfunction. That in turn will cause more malfunctions to go up unless you fix it. And the way you do that is you either place one pawn with a spare processor unit part and hope for the best as you roll the dice, and there's 3 of them, and try to get a success. Now, each dice represents a different thing that happens. One of them could say that you cause yourself a wound whilst you're doing the action. Another one might say that you have what the game very optimistically calls as adventures. If you roll a blank, you don't have one. If you roll a question mark, then an adventure is happening. And finally, the third one will actually determine whether your action succeeds or fails, and if it does fail, you'll get a couple of morale tokens as compensation. However, should you so choose to spend more time and add an extra pawn on top of this action, that will mean that the action succeeds, you get to spend a spare part, and replace this red cube, very satisfyingly, with a green cube. Fans of Robinson Crusoe will recognize this mechanism immediately and will know exactly what's going on. If you keep putting 2 pawns on all the time, avoiding luck, then you're not going to have enough pawns to do all the actions and fail the mission. However, if you keep pushing your luck too hard, then you're going to end up like Edward Norton in Rounders and have Matt Damon beat up. The trick is finding the right actions to chance on, the ones that you'd like to succeed but wouldn't matter so much if you failed, and just guaranteeing that the important stuff gets done.
And that is all fine. And if you like that in Robinson Crusoe, you'll very likely like First Martians. In some ways, it's more streamlined. Like a seal shedding its skin to reveal a beautiful ballerina, First Martians casts aside its playtime to reveal a more streamlined game. In fact, once you're comfortable with the rules, then you'll be able to trounce a Martian mission within an hour, meaning that you'll be able to bang out a whole campaign in a cosy weekend, or just in a couple of evenings together with your friends. In fact, setting this game up with its platitudes of tiny translucent cubes will sometimes take longer than a game itself. But by stripping the game time, something also went with it. By having fewer rounds, you have fewer opportunities to explore the game's systems. The focus goes from trying to get cool upgrades from your base that doesn't quite fit. It's almost like the picture, but not quite. Anyway, you have all these systems for oxygen and growing food and these masses of parts that will potentially break at some point, but it doesn't really matter unless the specific scenario says that actually, yes, it does matter. And instead of the game playing out on this literal smorgasbord of mechanisms, most of it, ironically, will play out on the mission sheet. But that's not it. There are whole mechanisms that are mentioned in the rulebook that you don't really find in the gameplay, including these samples which the game showers you with every time you discover a new part of Mars. And you need these so that you can research skills that your characters already have.
And talking of rulebooks, kids, I'm sure you've been waiting for Daddy Efka to tell you everything that he thinks about this one. And if you promise to stay quiet, I'll promise to never call myself Daddy Efka ever again. If you've been following this game on the internets at all, you will know the verdict. It's awful. Some have even called it the worst rulebook of all time. Now, we all know that the internet is prone to overreacting, so I wanted to give the other side a chance to have a say. So I asked the game's designer Ignacy, to shine a light on how they feel about the whole thing and whether the final version of the game is going to have an updated rulebook. I'm kidding, I know his name is pronounced Chevishek. It won't. And here's the thing, Ignacy feels like the rulebook isn't as bad as people say it is, because mostly everything's allegedly still, all the rules are still inside, and because it's such a big and complicated game, people are rushing through the rulebook because they're excited to play it, because they're all fans, they're all people who received the pre-order version. And they're all trying to get into the game as fast as possible without appreciating all the nuances and complexities that it has to offer. I am somewhere in the middle. Whilst I don't think this is the worst thing in the world, I also have to disagree with the designer's statement that all the rules are in there and it's just a problem of clarity. It's not. I have discovered rules that don't exist in this 40-page mammoth, and especially when they come to scenario-specific things, meaning that if you do play those scenarios, you'll likely have to open up an FAQ either on Board Game Geek as you're playing, or now handily baked into the app, which is actually a really nice feature. All in all, I think it's just a matter of deciding not to do any blind playtesting and hoping for a Hail Mary, which, look, I get it, blind playtesting has its own downsides, but surely they have to be outweighed by the fact that people are going to end up with something like this.
And then there's the app, which actually I quite like. It's as bare as bones, there's no bells or whistles, and it doesn't make your phone start shooting red Martian sand after the 3.5mm jack just to make atmosphere. Possibly because Apple removed the red Martian sand from the iPhone 7 onwards. But the idea of the app is to enhance that magical word, immersion. After all, this is a storytelling game where you want to simulate an experience, and there is a rich theme to pluck threads from. Each round or so, the app will throw out an event that will give you unexpected complications, and it will hit you hard, and it will hit you even harder if you don't assign pawns to deal with the consequences. In fact, this phrase, future consequences, will haunt you because the results are often debilitating and unpredictable, and so you'll be assigning pawns every round to deal with those consequences. And very likely you won't even ever find out what those consequences were. You'll just know that you have dealt with them. And then the events themselves are curt, matter-of-fact, and have this absurd quality that somehow just works. Like the app might say to you, you've run out of coffee, and everybody gets really stressed, and then a fight breaks out, and so each astronaut takes a wound, and one of the astronauts end up with a complication like anemia, which means they have to eat more food, but there is no more food, so they have to take another wound, but they can't, so instead they die, and then you all lose the mission. There are two take-homes from this. One, horrible, nasty events seem to be not so bad when they're wrapped up in a lovely story. And two, I think I need to send a gift card to my local coffee shop.
Yeah, there's something that doesn't feel immersive about these events and the adventures that come from rolling dice, because stories don't come from random events strung together, even if they are cascading into each other. The reason the Martian works so well is because sometimes Ridley Scott is an amazing director, and he manages to connect us to Matt Damon by putting us in his shoes and feel what he feels, his inability to give up in the face of certain failure. We've all read Robinson Crusoe when we were kids, and we've all went camping, and we have all those memories that we can connect with. But guess what? No one's ever been to Mars. No one's ever felt those feelings that he was feeling, as we have no memories to latch onto. And often a little bit of text is just not enough to get us there. But if the immersion doesn't necessarily come from events, it comes from the game's visual aesthetics in spades. This igloo with 4 tiny igloos attached to it, these little buggies that are just so unique and done awesome, not just because of how they look, but because how useful they are in the game and how much of a sting you feel when they are broken. This map with lots of tiny bits and various complications, and the fact that you have to place pawns on the map to explore more of it, everything just paints a really broad picture. And the use of green cubes to signify working parts and red cubes to signify broken parts is a stroke of genius, unless of course you're colorblind, because it paints a map, a vast schematic of everything that is right and wrong with your home. If only I had little green cubes over my kettle and toaster, life would be so much simpler.
So far, we have great visuals, a rulebook that's really hard to learn the game from, rules that don't come into play, and a narrow focus in the missions. And because we are no longer, no pun included, but are now apparently shut up and sit down, oh boy, you guessed it, that classic 2/3 of the way somewhere through the review turnaround.
Look, First Martians is like a bad first date with a really wonderful person. You might not be having the best time right now, but if you persevere, you will come to learn that you truly appreciate their bits. Oh, what a difference a campaign makes. All these systems that served as set dressing in single missions all of a sudden now matter, because in campaign mode, the game saves the state of absolutely everything. If you have enough oxygen now and you start using it, it might not matter so much, but over the course of the campaign, if you run out of it, well, we all know what oxygen is used for. Getting high. If you have 4 broken parts on your base nearing the end of a mission, you're not just going to power through the mission and end it because it won't matter, like in single missions. You're actually worrying about the consequences of everything that these broken parts are going to cause you. For example, it can cause further malfunctions, meaning more broken parts. It can cause a morale drop, it can cause oxygen loss, it can cause everything. It just, so many things can go wrong at all times, and you care about all of it.
The events in the app are still minimalistic, but they are no longer random, and they're far more interesting than running around trying to find rock samples to make cement. We are not kidding, that was actually the goal in one of the missions. And you will discover moments that make you gasp, slam your fists in anger, and really appreciate the arc that you're going through. And that more than makes up for the Spartan writing, but more importantly, you will find moments of innovation and pushing the boundaries of the game systems and how they're interpreted and applied.
It's clear that mechanically the game was predominantly developed as a vehicle to drive these campaigns. The unfortunate part is that once you're done. With the first one, whilst it's not legacy, Once you go through it, from my perspective, I don't think you will want to replay it again. With the second one, it has legacy elements, so you presumably use them up and you can't play it again. I say presumably because we actually haven't played the second one yet, but if it's anywhere near as close to the first one, things will be A-okay. And I think it's probably the publisher's way of increasing longevity in the game by adding single missions into it. It's like having your cake of a one and done game and then eating it too with theoretically infinite replayability. First Martians is much better as a campaign game, yet it is still hard for us to recommend it. Some of the most stressful moments in human lives come when we feel like we have absolutely no control over what's happening to us. And with the constant onslaught of malfunction cards, events, adventures, and rolling dice to see that you succeed at actions, you can see how the game, at one point, made me feel like I had to put on a Norah Jones album and breathe deeply, just so I would stop yelling at my friends.
Did I mention the mechanisms of oxygen or power production? If something causes your oxygen or power production to go down, then you have to pick a facility and shut it down, meaning you can no longer use it. And the only way to get it back is by sending a pip, rolling some dice, and hoping that you get a high enough number, and if you do, then great, it's back online, but if you don't, then it's still shut down. The great things about that action dice is that you can choose not to roll them by sending 2 pips to do the thing, or if you send the right crew member, you can spend a morale token to re-roll one that you don't like the look of. The shutting down mechanism is the equivalent of do not pass go, go directly to jail. And you know things are good when a Monopoly mechanism makes it into a modern board game. It's like your racist uncle coming round and mouthing off, and you just think to him, have we not passed this yet?
And as bad as the single mission experience is, we still have to recommend that you start with them, because you simply have to come to terms with the rules of the game and the intricacies of the strategies. You have to learn that setting up the morale track pretty high early in the game is important. You have to learn that the scientist has a skill card that combos very well with another one that the geologist has, or the other geologist card that is vital for exploration. If you don't mind putting it all that work with single missions, if you don't mind reading the hefty rulebook and then following that up with hours spent reading FAQs, if you don't mind the lack of control that comes from Robinson Crusoe and is still here, you will really enjoy this game. And we enjoyed it too, and we think the hassle is worth it. And if you don't mind putting in the work, you will find some truly memorable moments in First Martians. Now, leave me be, because I have some alone time with my froggy schedule. Bzzz, bzzz. That's not a sound that a frog makes. Oh, back home on Earth. That Matt guy, it was pretty cool of him to give us a lift home.
Yeah, he was really nice.
And his potatoes. Are we missing someone, though?
Like what? Like waffles?
No, like a person. Wasn't there a guy called Timmy with us?
No, I don't think so.
Thanks for watching our review. It was ever such a lot of work going all the way to Mars and back, really expensive.
Yeah, it really was. But if you like this video, please like and subscribe whether you are on Earth or whether you're on Mars or wherever you're watching it from.
Actually, if you're on Mars, don't subscribe, because the delay in time until the subscription, it's not worth it.
Do anyway.
But anyway, regardless of whether you're on Mars or here, every Thursday we'll have more viewer-powered reviews. And all you need to do is click that button and you'll get them beamed directly into your head.